I cheated with the sperm donor we vetted, got caught in real time, and I thought it would blow over if I stayed calm. It did not blow over, it detonated my marriage, my money, my job, and every relationship that ever pretended to like me. It happened in our apartment off the Upper West Side, the one we toured 3 times because she wanted good light for a baby. We had the donor over because we were finalizing details, paperwork, boundaries, the whole sterile plan, and I crossed the line I told myself I would not cross. I heard the key, saw the door open, and my wife walked in on me and him. No room for confusion, no way to pretend it was anything else. She didn't scream at first, she stared, like her brain was buffering, then she looked at me like I was a stranger wearing my face. I panicked and said the dumbest thing I have ever said in my life, at least this is a cheaper way than the fertility clinic. She laughed. She actually laughed. A real laugh, like something snapped loose, and she said, "Get the F out and take this sperm donating affair with you." I stood there waiting for her to stop, waiting for her to cry, waiting for her to be the version of her I could manage, and she just pointed at the door and kept pointing until I started grabbing random things. I had this belief that marriage means you don't just throw someone away in 10 minutes, even when they mess up. I texted her from the sidewalk like a normal person, like we were having a normal fight, and she replied with one line, "Your actions have consequences, don't contact me again." Then my phone started buzzing with our mutual friends asking what the hell happened, and before I even had a story, the donor was already telling me, "We need to stay together on this." How did she laugh like that? How was I supposed to leave my own home in Hell's Kitchen winter air with a tote bag? Why did everyone treat me like I committed some unforgivable crime? I expected my parents to be mad, not to cut me off. I called my mom and she didn't even let me finish. She said, "You made a choice, now you deal with the consequences," and my dad got on the phone and said he wasn't wiring me money to keep you comfortable while you destroy your life. My siblings didn't argue, they just sent me a group text that said, "We are not enabling you, actions have consequences," like they were reading from the same script. I stared at that screen in a bodega on 9th Avenue, holding a sad sandwich, and it felt fake, like they were messing with me. I tried going back the next morning with my keys, and the doorman didn't let me pass the lobby. He didn't look smug, he looked tired, like he already heard the whole thing, and he said, "She left a note with management, you're not allowed upstairs." I said it was my apartment too, I paid bills too, and he shrugged and said, "Talk to your lawyer." When I pushed, he lifted his radio like he'd rather call the cops than argue with me, and I walked out with my face burning because everyone in the lobby was watching. The donor offered his place in Astoria just for a couple nights, and I told myself it was temporary, that my wife would cool off. The second I stepped into his apartment, he locked the door behind me like it was normal, and he said, "You can't be alone right now, people will twist this." I slept on his couch and woke up to him making coffee like we were a couple, like I didn't just set my entire life on fire. Why was he acting like this was romantic? Why did I feel like I needed him to keep my story straight? Why was I the one sleeping on a couch like I got punished? 2 days later my wife's lawyer emailed me a letter telling me not to go near the apartment, not to contact her, and to route everything through counsel, like I was dangerous. I didn't even have a lawyer yet, because I kept thinking we could do this like adults, and then I realized the adults were already doing it without me. My job found out before I told anyone at work, because someone tagged me in a post that said I cheated with the donor, and it spread through group chats I didn't even know existed. HR called me in and asked if I was involved in conduct that could reflect poorly on the firm, and I said my personal life was private, and they said, "Not when it's public." My closest work friend, the one who used to eat lunch with me in Bryant Park, avoided me like I had a smell. When I cornered her near the elevator, she didn't even pretend, she said, "I can't be associated with this, I'm sorry." I said, "Associated with what? I made a mistake," and she said, "You didn't make a mistake, you made a decision, and actions have consequences." I started crying in the bathroom stall like I was 16, then I came out and saw someone had left a printed screenshot of my wife's angry text on the counter like a warning label. The donor kept telling me, "Stay calm, I'll handle logistics," and that should have freaked me out more than it did. He started replying to people for me, from my phone, telling them I was taking space and seeking therapy, which was not true yet. He also started calling himself the father as a joke, and every time he said it my stomach flipped, but I laughed like it was fine because what else was I supposed to do? Why was he so comfortable moving into my life? Why did I let him speak for me? Why did I keep thinking my wife would still come back? By week 3 I got an email from the building management saying my access fob was deactivated and my name was removed from the package list at the request of the leaseholder. I called the management office and said I was also on the lease, and they said, "Not anymore, your wife presented documentation." I didn't even know you could do that fast, like a human eraser. I tried to argue and the person on the phone said, very calm, "Ma'am, this is a private matter, actions have consequences, we can't help you." Then the clinic we toured on the Upper East Side, the one with the ridiculous waiting room chairs, emailed to confirm all future appointments were cancelled. The message was polite, like a hotel cancellation, and it ended with, "We wish you the best," which felt like being patted on the head. I drove myself insane thinking my wife did it to punish me, then I realized it wasn't punishment, it was her cutting off every future we planned. That was the first time it hit me that she wasn't going to cool off, she was done. My friend group from our West Village bar night stopped inviting me to anything, and then someone sent me a screenshot of a new group chat titled "Not Her," like I was Voldemort. I confronted one of them and she said, "You dragged all of us into your mess, we are not cleaning it up." I said, "You were acting like I murdered someone," and she said, "No, worse, you betrayed her, and you did it with the donor, that's next level." Why did everyone act like they were her lawyer? Why did no one ask what I needed? Why did it feel like my wife became the main character and I became a cautionary tale? When I finally got a lawyer, she asked me basic questions and I couldn't answer without sounding stupid. She asked, "Were you married at the time of conception?" And my brain snagged on the word conception, because I had been refusing to say it out loud. She asked if I was pregnant and I said, "I don't know," and she looked at me like I was lying to her and myself. She told me the fastest way to lose everything was to keep pretending this was a normal breakup, and she said, in certain courts, adultery matters, and judges don't like cheaters. My wife filed where she could, not in Manhattan, in a county tied to residency rules I didn't take seriously until it mattered. Her lawyer framed it like I was reckless and cruel, and the donor's name was listed like a fact, not a scandal. My lawyer told me not to contact my wife, and I broke that rule the same day and sent, "Can we talk like humans?" My wife replied, "You chose him, talk to him," and then I got served papers at the donor's apartment like I was some random person he let in. The donor started sleeping next to me like we were a real couple, and I let him because I felt like I had no other team. He'd hold my face and say, "They are trying to punish you for being honest about what you wanted," and I wanted to believe that, I needed to believe that. He also started telling me which friends to cut off, which messages to ignore, how to play optics, and when I questioned him he said, "Trust me, I've planned for this." Why did that line not send me running? Why did I hear planned and feel relieved? Why did I keep thinking control equals safety? When the pregnancy test turned positive, I stared at it like it was a joke the universe played on me. I told the donor and he smiled, not surprised, and said, "Good, we're on schedule." I told myself he meant schedule like appointments, but the way he said it felt like a project plan. I cried because I thought, this will make my wife soften because she wanted a baby so badly, and then I realized I was thinking like a manipulator, like I could use a baby as a peace offering. I texted my wife a photo of the test, no words, because I wanted her to feel it in her chest. She didn't reply, she had her lawyer send a message that said, "Do not contact my client. All matters regarding potential parentage will be handled through counsel." Potential parentage, like I was a stranger carrying a random child. I sat on the donor's bathroom floor shaking, and he stood over me and said, "This is fine, this is better, she can't interfere." My first prenatal appointment was in Midtown, and I walked in expecting warmth and got paperwork and side-eye. The nurse asked who the other parent was, and when I said, "The donor," she paused and said, "So, not a clinic donor," like she needed it clear for the record. I could feel the judgment without anyone saying it, and I hated that I cared, and I hated that I didn't stop. Why did the baby feel like proof and punishment at the same time? Why did I think being pregnant would make people nicer? Why did everything I touched turn into paperwork? My job put me on leave that wasn't really leave, it was a slow shove out the door. A senior person pulled me aside and said, "This is becoming a distraction," and when I said it was discrimination, he said, "No, it's consequences." They offered a severance that came with a non-disparagement clause, and it felt like being paid to shut up about my own humiliation. The donor told me to take it, said, "We need resources," like we were building something together. My parents refused to let me come home for the pregnancy, and my mom said, "You are not bringing this chaos into our house." I said, "It's your grandchild," and she said, "It's your consequences." My sibling messaged me a list of therapists and said, "That's all I can do, don't ask for money, don't ask for babysitting, don't ask for lies." I stared at that and felt rage, like they were punishing me for needing help, like I didn't deserve help. I tried to see my wife in person outside her gym in Chelsea, because I thought a face-to-face would force humanity back into it. She walked past me like I was a flyer someone hands you on the street, and her friend stepped between us and said, "Leave her alone." I said, "I'm still her wife," and my wife turned and said, "Not to me," then she laughed again, smaller this time, and said, "You really thought you could just show up?" Why did she look calmer without me? Why did that calm make me feel like I lost? Why did I keep expecting the world to pause for my feelings? At the divorce hearing timeline, everything moved faster than my brain. My wife had receipts, texts, screenshots, a clear narrative, and I had vibes and excuses. The judge asked me direct questions and I answered like I was being attacked, and the judge looked irritated, like I was wasting air. When my lawyer asked for support, the judge said, "In this court, infidelity is relevant, and I am not awarding alimony," and it felt like someone took the floor out from under me. The divorce finalized around day 180 from filing, and I walked out with papers that said I got nothing, not a dime, not even a good luck. My lawyer whispered, "I told you," and I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that I also paid bills, that I also existed. My wife didn't look at me once, and when her lawyer spoke to her, she nodded like a person who already moved on. The donor squeezed my hand and said, "We don't need her," like that was supposed to comfort me. Outside the courthouse, a person I didn't recognize took a photo of me and posted it, and someone tagged my employer anyway even though I was already gone. The comments called me a homewrecker even though it was my own marriage, and that made my brain short out, because how can you wreck your own home and still get called that? I DM'd the person and they replied, "Actions have consequences," then blocked me. Why did strangers feel entitled to punish me? Why did my life feel like public property? Why did I keep thinking I could argue my way out of shame? By the time I was visibly pregnant, the donor started filming everything, little clips of me eating, sleeping, crying for memories. He'd angle the camera when I got emotional and later he'd say, "You were so unstable that day," like he was narrating a case file. I asked him to stop and he said, "Relax, I'm documenting our journey," and when I snapped, he said, "Don't give anyone ammo." Anyone, like he already had an audience in mind. He also started pushing me to move, saying Astoria was too small for a baby, and he found a cheaper place farther out that felt like a downgrade I didn't want to admit. I told him I wanted to stay in the city because my doctor was here, my life was here, and he said, "Your life was with your wife, remember?" He said it like a lesson, like he was the only one allowed to remind me of reality. I tried reaching out to old friends from college, people not connected to my wife, and even they had heard. One of them said, "I can't get involved, I don't want drama," and when I asked what drama, she said, "You and consequences." I started to realize my name had become a warning label, and that's when I felt genuinely scared, like I couldn't just start over because the internet doesn't forget. Why did my mistake become everyone's entertainment? Why did nobody ask if I was safe? Why did consequences sound like a chant? When the baby was born, the donor insisted on being in the room, and the hospital staff treated him like the father because he was. No clinic paperwork, no sanitized story. He cried, not from emotion, from satisfaction, and he kept saying, "This is mine," under his breath, and I told myself I misheard him because I didn't want to hear it. He filled out forms fast, faster than me, and I saw him glance at the section about parental acknowledgement like he'd read it 100 times before. We went home and the donor controlled the apartment like he controlled my phone, my calendar, my sleep. He'd wake me up to feed the baby even when it was his turn, then later he'd say, "You can't handle nights, you're falling apart." If I cried, he'd start recording just in case, and if I asked him to stop, he'd smile and say, "I'm protecting our child." I began to feel like the baby was the only reason he tolerated me. I filed for child support because he started withholding money to teach me responsibility, and the first time I saw the support order I felt relief, like the system was on my side for once. He paid, on time, and he never complained, which should have warned me more than it did. He'd hand me the payment confirmation and say, "Keep every record, we're building a file," like it was teamwork. Why did he want records if he was paying? Why did he sound happy about court involvement? Why did I keep mistaking planning for love? Then CPS showed up at my door because someone reported unsafe sleeping conditions, and I knew immediately it was him, because the details were too specific, too inside. The worker walked through and asked calm questions, and I kept rambling about how unfair everything was, and I could see her eyes go flat. The donor stood behind her like a supportive partner and said, "I've been trying to help her cope," and the worker nodded like he was the responsible one. When she left, he said, "Don't worry, this is how we get you help," and I realized he was steering the ship. My ex-wife got dragged back in because the baby was conceived while we were still married, and that legal presumption hit her like a second betrayal. She tried to disclaim it, but her lawyer told her it was not automatic, not clean, not simple. She called me for the first time in months, not to reconcile, to say, "You ruined more than our marriage," and I said, "I didn't know it would follow you," and she laughed, no humor, and said, "You never know anything until it hurts you." She told me, "Actions have consequences, and now you made me pay too," then hung up. Court dates stacked up, and suddenly I was in family court hearing words like fitness said about me in a flat voice. The donor showed photos of my messy kitchen, screenshots of me texting spirals at 3 a.m., clips of me crying with the baby screaming in the background. My lawyer told me to stay composed, and I couldn't, because every exhibit felt like a trap he laid while I thought we were a team. The judge ordered a temporary schedule that gave him more time until things stabilize, and I walked out feeling like I was dissolving. My ex-wife tried to stay out of it, but the court treated her like a legal parent anyway, and she looked furious, not at him, at me. She said to me in the hallway, "I told you to get help, Now you're dragging me into your hell, and I snapped, "It's not my hell alone," and she said, "Yes it is, you built it." The donor stood there quiet, hands folded, looking like the most reasonable adult in the room. Why did the court listen to him more than me? Why did my ex-wife feel like my enemy instead of my partner of 4 years? Why did I keep thinking someone would rescue me? When the temporary order turned into him getting primary custody, it happened in a way that felt unreal, like I missed a step. The judge cited pattern of instability, inability to co-parent, and credible concerns, and the donor didn't celebrate, he just nodded like this was always the outcome. My ex-wife's face went pale because she realized what it meant for her too. I told the judge this was unfair, that the donor manipulated everything, and the judge said, "Ma'am, your choices led here," and I wanted to scream that choices shouldn't erase you as a mother. The child support order came next, and I thought I misread it, because it listed me and my ex-wife as obligated payers. My ex-wife's lawyer objected, and the judge pointed to the legal parent status and said it didn't disappear because she was angry, and she had been named and involved and it stuck. My ex-wife turned to me and said, "You did this," and I said, "I didn't mean to," and she said, "Meaning doesn't matter, consequences do." The donor walked out first, pushing the stroller like he was leaving a meeting. My parents found out about the support order because I called crying, and my dad said, "You were paying for your decisions, that's how life works." I begged for help, just a loan, and my mom said, "If we bail you out, you learn nothing, and we're done enabling you." My siblings said they felt bad for the baby but they were not helping me fight reality, and I hung up and stared at the wall while the donor texted me a photo of the baby smiling at him. Why did my family talk like I was a lost cause? Why did everyone say the same words like they were rehearsed? Why did it feel like the donor was the only one winning? I lost my apartment again because between support and legal fees and not having steady work, I couldn't keep up, and landlords in NYC don't care about your feelings. The donor offered to let me stay nearby in a smaller place, like a favor, and then he used my address changes to argue I was unstable. When I tried to get a job, background checks showed civil court stuff, and hiring managers smiled politely and said, "We went another direction," and I knew what they meant. I watched my life shrink to a phone, a Metro card, and a calendar full of hearings. My ex-wife moved on in a way that felt like a personal attack, not because she didn't have the right, but because she looked lighter without me. Someone sent me a photo of her in Central Park with friends, and I stared at it until my eyes hurt. I wanted to hate her, but I mostly felt panic, because she escaped and I was still trapped in this shared legal mess with her. The donor told me, "Stop stalking her, focus on being useful," and I hated him for saying it and hated myself for listening. Then he moved farther, not out of state, just far enough that every visit became a logistical punishment. He'd offer me a 2-hour window, then forget and claim I missed it, and he'd document that too. When I complained, he'd say, "I'm prioritizing the child," and the court loved that phrase. My ex-wife tried to modify her involvement, tried to sever her obligations, and the judge said it was complicated and slow and not guaranteed, and I watched her realize she was chained to my worst decision. Why did the system reward the person who set the trap? Why did my ex-wife have to pay for a child she never got to parent? Why did every road lead back to me losing? I finally did what people do when they have nobody left. I posted online asking if I was the problem, because I needed someone, anyone, to say I wasn't a monster. I wrote it like I was being honest, but even as I typed I could hear how self-serving it sounded, like I kept trying to make cheating sound like a budgeting choice. I ended it with, "Ada for thinking my wife and the donor went too far by turning this into full custody and child support on both of us when I'm the one who carried the baby." I hit post and refreshed like it was going to save me. The replies came fast and they were brutal in a way that felt surgical, like strangers saw the truth clearer than I did. "Yes, Ada, you cheated with the donor, you weaponized pregnancy, and you're shocked the adults acted like adults. Yes, Ada, your ex-wife laughed because you said something cruel and stupid, and now you're learning the price. Yes, Ada, you keep calling him a donor when he's the father, and you keep calling consequences too far like you're owed comfort. Yes, Ada, stop acting surprised that courts care about stability when you keep making chaos." I tried to argue in comments and people kept replying, "Actions have consequences," like the internet joined the chorus. Then someone recognized details, the neighborhoods, the timing, the way I quoted my wife, and it spread again, into local circles, into people who actually live here. A person messaged me a screenshot of a parent group warning others about me by description, not name, and I felt my throat close because even anonymous wasn't anonymous anymore. The donor sent me a single text, "You shouldn't have posted," and then, for the first time, he said the quiet part out loud on a phone call, calm as a weather report, "This was always the goal, a child, full control, no mother attached." He reminded me that he now had custody, that my ex-wife and I were both paying, and that if I kept making noise he'd go for even less contact, because he already had enough footage to make me look unfit forever. How did I end up paying to fund the person who took my kid? How is it real that my ex-wife is paying too because I couldn't keep my legs and my mouth shut? What happens when he decides the last bit of access I have is still too much? The next thing he did was file for a temporary order of protection, and he used my own words against me, screenshots of me begging to see the baby, the Reddit post, even a voicemail where I said, "You can't do this to me." I got served on the sidewalk outside the family court building in downtown Brooklyn like I was a stranger causing trouble, and the paper said I couldn't contact him directly, couldn't go within a certain distance of his place, and all communication had to be through a co-parenting app that charges a monthly fee. In court he stood there with that calm face and told the judge he feared erratic behavior, and when I tried to speak the court officer told me to lower my voice, like I was already guilty of being too much. The court gave me a supervised visitation order, because the judge said until things stabilize I could only see my own baby at a center with fluorescent lights and locked doors, and I had to pay for it. The first time I went, I rode the A train shaking, thinking I'd walk in and my baby would reach for me, and instead a staff person said, "Hands visible, follow the rules," like I was dangerous. He arrived with a stroller and a binder and he greeted the staff by name, like he'd been there before, and when my baby looked at me and started crying he whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "See, even the baby knows your stress," and the supervisor wrote something down. Then the app became a trap, because every message I sent got labeled hostile if I asked for extra time, and manipulative if I said I miss my baby, and unstable if I used too many words. I missed one visit because the subway got stuck between stations and the center marked me a no-show, and he filed it the same day like proof I didn't care. When I tried to call him anyway, just once, because I thought a human voice could fix it, he screenshotted the call log and his lawyer sent me a warning that I violated the order and they'd seek contempt. How am I supposed to co-parent through an app that charges me to be ignored? How is being late on the subway a reason to see my baby less? How did I become the one who has to prove I'm not a threat just to hold my own child? The donor filed a civil case over harassment and reputational harm because of my online post, and I didn't take it seriously until a process server showed up at a temp job I'd barely started. I couldn't afford to miss work for court, so I missed the court date, so he got what my lawyer called a bad default, and my bank account got hit the next week. I opened my app and saw my balance drop to almost nothing, and I called the bank crying, and the person said, "It's a levy, ma'am, we can't stop it," like it was weather. Right after that, payroll garnishment hit, not just me, my ex-wife too, because the support order was already in place and now there were arrears and fees stacked on top. She called me from an unknown number, and the second I said hello she said, "My paycheck is getting taken because you couldn't stop," and I said, "I didn't know it could snowball like this," and she laughed in that flat way and said, "You never know anything until it's your neck." I said, "I'm sorry," and she said, I don't want your sorry, I want you out of my life," and then she added, "Actions have consequences, and I'm done paying yours," and hung up. I tried to fix it by getting a better job fast, and I got an offer, and then it got pulled after the background check, because apparently family court orders and civil judgments show up in ways I didn't understand until it was too late. The recruiter called and said, "We are going another direction," and when I pushed she said, "It's not a fit," and I heard the real meaning anyway. Then the visitation center emailed that my next session was canceled because I had an unpaid balance, and I stared at the screen thinking, I have to pay a fee to be supervised with my baby, and if I can't pay, I don't get to go. How is money now the gate between me and my child? How is my ex-wife paying too and still nobody cares? How did my life turn into invoices and court stamps? Then my own family made it weirder, because my parents didn't just refuse to help, they mailed me an actual letter, not a text, a letter, saying they would not provide financial assistance, housing, childcare, or legal support, and they'd already told extended family the same. My mom wrote, "We love you, but we will not enable you, your actions have consequences," and seeing it in ink made me feel like I'd been fired from being a daughter. I tried showing up at their place anyway, because I was desperate and it was cold, and my dad opened the door just enough to say, "Don't do this," and he pointed to the lobby camera like even he didn't want me inside his building. All of my social circles dropped me in a way I didn't think could happen in a city this big. I walked into my old coffee spot near Columbus Circle and the barista looked at me like she recognized me from somewhere bad. Then the manager came over and said, "We are going to ask you to leave." There were complaints, and when I asked from who, she said, "Please don't make a scene." I went to the gym I used to go to in Hell's Kitchen and my key tag didn't work, and the desk person said my membership was terminated for conduct, and I stood there holding my water bottle like an idiot while other people walked around me. Then he filed to relocate, not out of state, just far enough that the court would call it reasonable, and he got it approved because he had stable housing, stable income, a childcare plan, and I had a stack of missed sessions I couldn't afford. The judge said video calls could bridge the gap, and the donor nodded like he'd been waiting for that exact sentence, and my ex-wife's lawyer argued again about severing her from this, and the judge said it would take time and wasn't guaranteed. My ex-wife looked at me outside the courtroom and said, "I hate you for chaining me to him," and I said, "I didn't chain you," and she said, "Yes you did, the day you said it was cheaper, and she walked away shaking like she might throw up. Why does relocation feel like a clean word for taking my baby away? Why does every attempt to fight back turn into a new bill I can't pay? Why do I keep thinking there's a bottom when it keeps dropping? After he moved, the extras started, and they were presented like normal parenting costs, except he treated them like a punishment schedule. Private daycare deposit, nanny hours, a pediatric specialist just to be safe, then a child therapist to monitor attachment, and each time the court ordered me and my ex-wife to contribute based on imputed income, meaning the judge decided what I should be able to earn even though nobody would hire me. I got an email saying my wages would be garnished from gig platforms too, like even the little scraps I made delivering food could be taken, and the first time it happened I sat on a curb in Midtown and laughed until I started crying, because it was so stupid it felt unreal. Then housing fell apart in a way that felt like the city itself was rejecting me. I got denied for rooms because my credit was wrecked, then denied again because the court address history looked unstable, then I landed in a shelter placement in Queens where the intake worker said, "No domestic drama, no court mess," like those were choices I could set down at the door. I told the visitation center my new address, and they said they couldn't approve it for unsupervised contact anyway, and I didn't even have unsupervised contact, so it was just another form that changed nothing. He filed for a psychological evaluation of me, and the court granted it because he framed it as supportive, like he wanted me to get help, and my refusal would look like denial. I sat in an office in Manhattan answering questions while a stranger typed notes, and I could feel my own words turning into evidence. Every time I said I felt misunderstood, it sounded like avoidance. Every time I said I was targeted, it sounded like paranoia. 2 weeks later, my lawyer called and said the report didn't help, and the donor's lawyer immediately requested fewer visits to reduce stress on the child, and I could already see the judge nodding before we even walked into the courtroom. How is an evaluation supposed to help when it becomes a weapon? How is every service just another way to label me unfit? How did I end up in a shelter paying child support for a child I barely get to see? The final thing, the one that makes me feel sick even typing it, is he filed for sole legal custody with permanent restrictions on my access, and he attached a timeline like a project plan, my missed visits, my debt, my shelter address, my online post, the evaluation, everything, all wrapped up as pattern. My ex-wife got served too because he wants enforcement, fees, and a recalculation that keeps her on the hook longer, and she texted me one line, "If you contact me again I'll file my own order," like I'm the threat, not the person who set this up. On the app he sent me a message that didn't even pretend to be kind, "You did your part, now stop interfering," and reading that made my hands go numb because it matched what he said on the phone, that this was always the goal, a child with no mother attached. What does coming back from this even mean when the court record follows you everywhere? What am I supposed to rebuild when the foundation is my own choices and everyone can see them in black and white? If this is my life now, how does it get anything but worse? There's no redemption arc coming, no surprise turnaround where I get my life back, no moment where everyone realizes they were too harsh and apologizes. My ex-wife is still paying and she hates me, my family treats me like a lesson, my friends are gone, my work life is a crater, and the father of my child is calmly building a world where I am a supervised visitor at best and a line item at worst. The next hearing is already on the calendar. My lawyer keeps saying prepare for an unfavorable outcome, and I keep catching myself thinking I can talk my way out of it like I'm still the kind of person consequences bounce off of, and then I remember the doorman, the judge, the bank levy, the shelter intake, the app notifications, all the doors that closed and stayed closed. At the next hearing the judge didn't even look up when my lawyer started the speech we practiced. She just said my name like she was tired of it and asked if I'd paid the visitation center balance yet. I said I was trying, like trying is a currency, and the donor's lawyer slid over a printout showing the balance still open and my last missed session marked no show. The judge said, "Then we are not continuing visits at this time," like she was postponing a haircut, not cutting me off for my own kid. The donor didn't react, he just clicked his pen and typed on his phone like this was a calendar invite he already accepted. My lawyer dropping me, not dramatically, just an email that said I was behind on fees and they could not continue representation. I called her office over and over until the receptionist finally said, "You need to stop, we can't help you," and when I said I'd pay later she said, "Actions have consequences," then hung up. I walked into the courthouse hallway alone and realized I didn't even know where to stand without someone telling me. The donor passed me with the stroller and didn't glance at me once, like I was a chair. Then my ex-wife filed her own thing, separate from him, against me, and it hit me like a brick because I still had this fantasy that she would hate me privately but never legally. Her papers basically said she wanted reimbursement for every dollar she's paying because of me, plus fees, plus a judgment that follows me anywhere I try to work. I called her, forgetting she told me not to, and she answered just to say, "Stop calling me, stop dragging me, I'm done being your collateral damage." Then she sent me a screenshot of her lawyer's email thread titled Enforcement. How is it possible to be sued by the person you cheated on while also paying child support to the person you cheated with? How did my wife go from my partner to my creditor? How does the word family mean this now? I got flagged at the shelter because I missed curfew once after court, and the intake worker said, "You can't keep doing unstable stuff, like court is a hobby." I tried explaining I had nowhere else to go, and she pointed to a laminated sign that said rules and tapped the word consequences like it was scripture. When I asked where I was supposed to sleep, she shrugged and said, "Not here if you keep this up." I walked out into Queens at night with my bag and my phone at 12%, and it hit me that I'm literally homeless while the donor is posting stroller photos like a proud dad. I tried crashing on a coworker's couch from the temp job and she said yes in a text. Then when I got there she stood in the doorway and said, "I talked to my boyfriend, we can't," and she wouldn't let me step inside. She wouldn't meet my eyes, she kept staring past me down the hallway like she was scared I'd force my way in. I said, "You offered," and she said, "I didn't know everything, and I'm not enabling you." Then she closed the door so softly it felt worse than a slam. I sat on the stairs and heard her lock it. Then I made the stupidest mistake, the kind you only make when you're desperate and tired and your brain is soup. I sent a message in the co-parenting app that said, "I'm sleeping outside, you can't do this," and I tagged it urgent like that meant something. His lawyer replied within an hour saying I was attempting to guilt and harass and they'd be filing for contempt because the order said communication must be child-focused only. 2 days later I got stopped leaving the subway at J Street because there was a warrant for failing to appear on something connected to the civil case, and I had to stand there while an officer read my name off a screen like I was a shoplifter. Why does every cry for help turn into a violation? Why does every system treat me like a problem to contain? Why does he get to keep pressing buttons until the door's locked? The donor walked into court with a new binder, thicker, and the first page had my arrest record printed out like a trophy. He said he was concerned about exposure and instability and wanted to suspend contact indefinitely, and the judge nodded like she already agreed. My ex-wife sat there too because her case is still tied in, and she looked at me like she couldn't believe I found a way to make it worse. When the judge said I could submit written updates through counsel only, I almost laughed because I don't have counsel, and everyone in that room knew it. Then he filed to change the baby's last name, and he didn't even pretend it was about tradition. He said he wanted to reduce confusion because the child didn't need conflicted parental identities. The judge asked if I objected and I opened my mouth and nothing came out, because what do you say when the person who took everything is also holding the only thing you can't replace? My ex-wife objected too, out of spite or principle, I don't even know, and the donor's lawyer turned and said, "Your client asked to be out of this, correct?" Like a trap. Watching him use her own pain as a tool made my stomach flip, because it was so clean, so practiced. The donor started sending me app messages that are basically invoices and reminders. Payment due, late fee applied, court-ordered extras attached, and every message ends with "do not respond unless it concerns the child," while the child is the only thing I'm not allowed to talk about like a real person. My ex-wife texted me once more from a new number just to say, "If you ever show up near my building again I will call the police, I don't care what you want," and I could hear her shaking even through the words. I keep catching myself planning a comeback like this is a bad year I can hustle through, then the app pings, then another notice shows up, then another door closes, and I remember this isn't a story that turns upward. I cheated with the donor we vetted, I said the cheapest line imaginable, and the universe took me literally, cheaper than a clinic, cheaper than a wife, cheaper than dignity. Now I'm just a payer on a case number and a cautionary screenshot in someone else's group chat. There's no redemption arc hiding around the corner, no magical judge who will suddenly decide I misunderstood, no surprise reunion, no forgiveness, no reset button, just paperwork that outlives my feelings.